Welcome to the Zoom Bible study. Whether you are in the live Zoom Bible study or watching this video later, I appreciate your attendance and presence. How we image God matters. How we understand who God is plays a big role in our spiritual formation. It plays a big role in shaping our theology and how we approach and understand Scripture. We need healthy images of God instead of toxic ones. This short-term study addresses those toxic images, or at least some of them. The study is called Healing the Distorted Images of God. One of my resources for this study is an old workbook by Dale and Juanita Ryan titled Recovery from Distorted Images of God. But it's just a little inductive Bible study workbook. So most of this study is my own, and any other resources will be noted accordingly. Last week in lesson one, I shared a few general reasons why we end up with distorted images of God. And then I focused on healing the distorted image of God as a God of impossible expectations. Tonight, we begin a two-part lesson on healing the distorted image of God as being disinterested and emotionally distant. Now, there are many reasons we get this particular distorted image of God. For instance, as I mentioned last week, the role of parents can affect us. If our parents were emotionally distant, and seemingly disinterested in us, we sometimes transfer this bad trait to God. Another reason we get this distorted image is that if we define our relationship with God with an overemphasis on feelings, then when those dry spells come, we mistakenly interpret it as God withdrawing or becoming distant rather than that's just a normal part of our life journey. A third reason we get this distorted image of God is because God is both transcendent and immanent. When we say that God is transcendent, we mean God is beyond and above all things. God is wholly other, beyond human comprehension, beyond even space and time. And when we say that God is immanent, we mean that God is present, involved, and very near, that God is pervading and sustaining the universe, including humanity. The problem comes when we overemphasize God's transcendence at the expense of God's immanence. And when this happens, it can lead to the image of a remote, aloof, disinterested God who kind of just set the universe into motion but has little day-to-day concern for it. So how do we counter the distorted image of God as being a God who is disinterested and emotionally distant? Well, let's begin in the Old Testament. The first scripture I want us to look at counters that distorted image of God as disinterested and emotionally distant, and it's found in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 10 through 11. And it's a part of what is known as the Song of Moses. It's a poem that reviews God's interactions with Israel during their years in the wilderness. Let me share the screen. God sustained you in a distant land. In a barren and howling waste, God shielded you and cared for you, guarding you as the apple of God's eye. What wonderful images. Like the eagle that stirs up its nest and hovers over her young, God spreads wings to catch you and carries on pinions. This is also one of the feminine images of God that we find in the Bible. And it shows a picture of a God who is close and hovers over us, hardly a disinterested or distant God. And then we go to the Psalms, and the Psalms are filled with images of God as one who is present, near, and involved in our lives. There are many to choose from, but it's hard to beat Psalm 139. Now, this is a pretty long quote, and I still had to choose to leave some of it out, but I think we'll get to the point. Oh Lord, the psalmist says, you've searched me and you know me. You know if I'm standing or sitting. You read my thoughts from far away. No, that's a line that shows the proper balance of God's transcendence and immanence. And then the psalmist continues, whether I walk or lie down, you are watching. You are intimate with all my ways. A word is not even on my tongue, O Lord, before you know what it is. You hem me in before and behind, shielding me with your hand. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, a height my mind cannot reach. Where could I run from your spirit? Where could I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you're already there. If I could fly away with wings of the morning or make my home on the far side of the sea, but even there, your hand will guide me, your mighty hand holding me fast. If I say the darkness will hide me and the light around me becomes night, even darkness won't be dark to you. The night will shine like the day. Darkness and light are the same to you. And then we get into some beautiful words that speak of God watching over us from our beginning to our end. The psalmist says, you created my inmost being and knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you while I was being made in that secret place, knitted together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body even there. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me before even the first of them came to be. How precious your thoughts are to me, O God. How impossible to number them. I could no more count them than I could count the sand. But suppose I could, you would still be with me. So much for a disinterested, emotionally distant God. Psalm 139 almost takes our breath away. And some of the highlights of Psalm 139 to me are that even in the mundane, everyday stuff of life, God is attentive. The psalmist says, whether I walk or lie down. Now that's mundane, everyday stuff. That's the everyday stuff of life. That's just walking around. Whether I walk or lie down, you are watching. You are intimate with all of my ways. What language to remind us that God is so interested and so present that God knows us way better than we know ourselves. God knows what we're going to think before we think it. And God knows what we're going to say before we say it. And I love the poetic extremes the psalmist uses to test the limits of God's presence, or better yet, to affirm the limits of God's presence. The psalmist says, if I go up to the heavens or to the depths of Sheol, which is the place of the dead, it is the darkest, deepest abyss. And then the psalmist says, and even to the furthest limits of the sea, you, God, are present. And this is especially comforting to us when we find ourselves in a metaphorical Sheol, when we feel that we are in a deep abyss, when we feel lost in the midst of grief, when we feel lost in the midst of fear, when we feel lost in the midst of guilt, or whatever takes us to our spiritual abysses, in the darkness, in the loneliness, in the despair. God's hand, the psalmist says, will guide us. God's mighty hand holds us. If that doesn't help heal the distorted image of God as a God who is disinterested and emotionally distant, I don't know what will. But, oh, wait a minute. There is something better. But that will have to wait until next week. We'll have to wait to part 2 of this lesson when we go to the New Testament and we find Jesus. Unto then, God's abundant grace and peace to you.